Hello and welcome to our strategy outlook on 5G RAN, part of our Spotlight on 5G series. I'm Ray Lemaitre, Editorial Director at TelecomTV. Now, the advent of 5G introduced a new radio interface to cellular networks, but the radio access network is also being influenced and disrupted by other industry initiatives and trends. As well as the emergence of the virtualized RAN, we're now also seeing significant progress towards an open RAN, breaking down the monolithic architecture of the RAN into more accessible and interoperable interfaces, benefiting operators through greater supplier choice, more innovation, and hopefully lower costs. We're going to look at how the RAN will continue to evolve over the next few years and how operators and vendors will shape its development through standardisation and into commercial deployments. And coming up later in the programme, we have a roundtable discussion featuring executives from Orange, Cellnex, HPE, Intel and Fortinet. Plus we talk to a number of telecoms leaders to get their views on 5G RAN. But first, we have an exclusive interview with Tareq Amin, Group CTO at Rakuten Mobile. I spoke with Tareq earlier and started by asking him for an update on where Rakuten Mobile is with its network rollout in Japan.
Ray, at the early inception of our network build-out, we have set three pillars of strategic objectives for Rakuten Mobile. One is to build an end-to-end cloud-native architecture, including Openran. Second is around mass-scale automation. And third is enablement of elasticity and auto-healing into the fabric of our network. And of course, all of these technology enablement, from my perspective, don't mean a whole lot if we don't build coverage. So we have put our energy to fast track our build for both 4G and 5G. We have announced previously that we have accelerated the 5G build out by almost 5 years. And in fact, we are absolutely on track to deliver 96% of population coverage of Japan by September of this year. And similar to what we have done to 4G, we are now in the process of fast tracking and accelerating our millimeter wave deployment as well as sub-6 in Japan.
Now, as you mentioned, Rakuten is offering 4G and 5G services. Is this all being delivered over the same radio access infrastructure?
Absolutely. So Ray, our strategy maybe was slightly unique. What we have focused our energy on is the diversification of our hardware supply chain, whether it is products for macro, products for massive MIMO, products for indoor and femto. Now across all of these platforms and products, the software stack that is managing the radio access is common, and it is common for both 4G and 5G. And it is common in the essence that its baseband is fully cloudified. It sits on our edge data center. Today, our 5G has a bit more advantage than what we've done in 4G. In fact, it is completely disaggregated, decomposed, and cloud native, sitting on Rakuten RCP platform.
Now, as many people know, Rakuten Mobile has been at the forefront of Open RAN developments. How has this disaggregated architecture approach helped you to achieve your goals?
I think I had, for me personally, a couple of key initiatives that we wanted to push. I think in the context of our network, we knew that to enter Japan as a fourth mobile operator, we had to be disruptive in our cost structure, and we had to be disruptive in our architecture, and we had to be disruptive in our service agility to deliver new age services to our customers. We know that we had to compete very hard, especially on the cost and economics for building, engineering, and architecting modern platforms. Openran plays a huge factor to this strategy. I believe if you look globally, between 60 to 80% of CapEx spend in mobile operators is spent on radio access. Disaggregation of this technology is critical. I always say this is about a journey towards demystifying the architecture of radio access. For us, we could not be any more happier about the results that we have seen. And what impressed us the most is not just necessarily about the disaggregation. It's the benefits that you get with automation, the benefit that you get with zero-touch provisioning, and the benefit that you get to re-enable new platform architecture and even new organizational structure to run and manage networks of the future.
Now, would you say that Rakuten Mobile's 5G network is a blueprint for what other operators could build out? And how close does it conform to O-RAN Alliance specifications?
Ray, I would hope so. I would hope that obviously Rakuten alone cannot create this journey by ourselves. A larger collaborative ecosystem is needed to see what we see every day and to see the opportunity. One thing I could tell you for certainty, I have talked to a large number of CXOs in the last 15 months of operation Rakuten Mobile Network. We had a lot of very healthy debate and discussion, and I believe we all converged to the idea that this blueprint architecture of what we have built have merits, and it is the right architecture to run and build both brownfield and greenfield networks on. I think now the remaining points is to see more adoption globally, to see more creation of this ecosystem. We are absolutely compliant to O-RAN standards. We are in fact a part of the board of O-RAN Alliance and very committed to support the journey and the standardization that are needed to drive this technology and make it thrive across a larger ecosystem. Our 5G network, in fact, if you look at what we've done with Massive MIMO, follows all the specification that was done and ratified by the O-RAN Forum and community. So we hope that this will become the blueprint for the larger ecosystem. We hope that collaboration between Rakuten and other mobile operators could be realized to advance the adoption of O-RAN across their infrastructure.
Now, how is the Openran ecosystem developing? Are you seeing accelerated innovation from the global R&D sector?
You know, the thing that I'm really delighted about, I think if you look 12 months ago, the whole industry was in debate whether this platform works, can it scale, does it work in urban area, does it deliver on the same performance and capability that traditional macro base stations do? And I really believe that we have now passed the stage of debate, to the stage of understanding what needs to happen and what are the remaining gaps for adoption, not only in greenfield, but also brownfield. I am delighted to see not only for private acceleration or adoption of the idea of Open RAN, but also government involvement towards Open RAN. It's been extremely delightful for us to see, whether it is in Japan, UK, Germany, United States. We're seeing some amazing progress towards enablement of this industry. I really truly believe that the ecosystem and the industry as a whole is starting to realize the benefits and the advantages of running a software network and what that could mean to future autonomy into the fabric and the DNA of the platform of future mobile networks.
So what should the industry be focused on in terms of Open RAN innovation? What needs the most focus right now?
So Ray, I think it is no doubt that the industry as a whole have done a really great job at rallying a group of operators to define standards that vendors could start building hardware against, and then software architecture to be able to deliver it against these hardware. However, in my view, I think now it's time to start thinking about an idea of taking the ideas and validation of Open RAN from the labs to real production network, not just only in Japan, but across the world. And even if it's a small clusters of trial, it would give the operator community the ability to validate the readiness of the software architecture, the ability to validate compliance to 3GPP features, ability to validate maybe deployment model versus legacy deployment models. I really would love to see far more production adoption of Open RAN. And I think that the industry as a whole has finally started to put a lot of great momentum about discovering new hardware platforms, but I would really suggest that the time to validation and production environment is now. The time to look at an opportunity to investigate the advantages of Openran software architecture in real commercial network is maybe the thing that the whole industry need to rally towards. Really the rest, I think, are going to fall in place once people start to experiment and validate and trial beyond lab environment to carry commercial traffic over Openran networks.
Lots of development there for the industry to do. Tareq, what do you want to see next in terms of overall radio access network developments?
Well, I think what I'm hopeful and optimistic to see is another, whether a greenfield or brownfield operator that is going to adopt this platform architecture, that continues to validate it not in the labs, but go into production, test and validate and help participate in the journey of creation of the software, not only on the cloud architecture, but also the automation framework that we need to do to deliver on zero-touch provisioning, lifecycle management, and auto-healing for Openran. I think the more that we collaborate, the more that we see such use cases gets deployed into production and we move out of labs into real production environment, I do believe this is very good for the industry and for the entire ecosystem. I have no doubt that you're going to see the creation of a diversified supply chain across of Europe, across United States, and other geographies that are going to embrace and adopt the creation of Openran hardware and software for the better good of the ecosystem.
And that was Tareq Amin speaking to me earlier. As ever, Tareq is absolutely convinced that the Rakuten mobile approach to mobile network infrastructure will influence next-gen network developments around the world, and it's hard to argue that this isn't already starting to happen through peer influence, the tech developer ecosystem, and directly too as Rakuten's team works directly with other operators such as Etisalat. Every market needs a certain level of disruption, and there's little doubt that Rakuten Mobile is having an impact not only on the Japanese market, but on the strategies of others around the world. Never a dull moment with Tareq. Of course, he isn't the only person we've been talking to about developments in the radio access network. We've been speaking to a number of other movers and shakers for our Spotlight on 5G series, and we're going to hear from some of them now. I spoke with Matt Conrod, Director of vRAN Business Development at Intel, and asked him what we have learned from early virtual RAN commercial deployments.
Well, Ray, we have a number of commercial and trial vRAN deployments today, and there's quite a bit of learnings already happening in the community. I think that what we've learned is that the compute is ready. We can absolutely deploy a commercial vRAN solution. The technology is here for both narrowband 4G, 5G, or even 5G massive MIMO. But the technology is new. I think we all know in the old days that a single vendor would bring everything completely done to the operator. And in virtual RAN, there are new players and new interfaces and new technology. So we've learned that starting early, exposing not only the planning teams, but the operations team to the new technology, to the new players, and to the new interfaces is a critical piece in this. This is not a new feature that we're deploying. We're deploying a new way of building the radio and access network.
That said, how does Intel intend to help operators with this transition to virtualized RAN?
Intel's had a vision, a network transformation vision for the operator community. For the past 10 years, we've had this vision and we realized it over time. And our vision's always included the RAN. So Intel, we believe we can help with the transition, the operator moving from traditional ways of building networks, vRAN and RAN in particular, and moving to a virtualized environment. But this vision, this Intel vision that I mentioned, doesn't stop with just virtualizing the network function. We believe that a cloud-native web-scale architecture for telco, including RAN, has a lot of untapped promise. increasing your core utilization, improving resilience, and also adding in network AI are all part of our future vision. And we'd like to help the operator community realize the benefits of a web-scale infrastructure for RAN.
I also spoke with Geetha, Global Head of Telco Solution Incubations at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and asked her how operators can prepare for Openran deployments.
So what we have seen, as Matt alluded to with respect to technology, yes, the operators have gotten past the technological issues and hurdles with respect to how to roll out the Openran. But then what they're seeing as challenges are the operations part. So operations is where the operators are concentrating on right now, because the edge has to run at scale. And when you disaggregate a whole lot of components, then you have a whole lot of challenges. Like you need tools and you need people and resources to manage these extremely distributed far edge and near edge locations with the general purpose compute, which is a new technology that they're not used to. And then from there, they have to make sure that things like, zero touch provisioning, automation, et cetera, are in place. So those are the type of challenges that operators are looking into, because that's what's really holding them up in terms of, rolling out far edge with Openran and near edge and far edge with Openran at scale.
So HPE sees two distinct types of challenges for operators adopting Openran. One is concerned with the economics and total cost of ownership, the other on how to scale out the expected massive deployments.
When you talk to the operators specifically look at two challenges. I call it the front end and the back end. The front end is where they look at it from a business case TCO perspective. Is there a TCO for me? Because their current world is appliance model, and they just have, one monolithic solution, which is basically the hardware, software, services, the whole thing. So it's like buying a car and saying, what color car do you need? Whereas in this world, it is completely disaggregated, multiple pieces, hardware is separate from software, services, etc. And how do you put them all together, and then how do you actually come up with a TCO that really helps the operators? That is something that HPE is working on with the operators to help them make sure that the whole system is optimized, not just at a single appliance level, like a baseband unit, but also, adjacencies. Baseband, front hall gateways, cell site routers, etc. Multiple applications at the edge. How do you make sure that they coexist? Multi-tenancy of the RAN. How does that coexist? All of those things, putting all of those things together and making sure that the system TCO is there. Then the other portion that HPE is helping operators with is what I call the back end. This is where the operations part kicks in. This is where you have, as I explained the challenge earlier, we have a scale to be deployed, like, lots of far edge locations and near edge in the hundreds of thousands. How do you make sure that this is all optimized and automated? Because without automation, you just cannot manage that many sites. And then when you talk about automation, how do you get to the component level automation? Not just, helping with the servers or the OS or the CAS layer, but how do you, within an HPE server, how do you upgrade an Intel FPGA card or an EASIC card or a NIC card? So those are the kind of things at a system level for the backend, and the operations is what HPE is helping operators with.
Great insights there. Now, during our recent 5G Evolution Summit, we heard from Tom Bennett, Director of Technology Services, Solutions, Architecture, Devices and Labs at EE and BT, on what the biggest challenges were that BT faced when looking at introducing Openran, especially when it needs to be implemented and run alongside existing RAN technology in a hybrid network.
yes, Openran is exactly the kind of thing we need to be looking at as an operator community. We want to bring on board these kind of new technologies and kind of reinforce our ecosystem. But I've really got to come down to from key challenges. I mean, there are a multitude, as mentioned, in particular customer experience for me. The number one challenge we all have as operators is to ensure a continuity of an excellent customer experience. That's what our customers are paying us for. And are the products ready and available that can meet those demands, be those demands extra rural, low latency, or really high capacity in the urban areas? As you look at where we are in the product life cycle, I think for the operators and for BT in particular, we have the best 5G network out there. We're in 160 kind of towns and cities now. And therefore, as we look at O-RAN, we're looking at the opportunities outside the macrocellular network in the course of the next few years so we can prove the technology and prove that hand in hand with our customers. Working on private networks, working on neutral hosts, small cells, those kind of implementations allows us to learn about the technology, allows us to tailor the service to our customers and to ensure that we're bringing the whole ecosystem up together. It will also allow us to work on our operating model, as you say, where we're working in a hybrid scenario. Do we have customers who are going to need access to a private network, but mobility to the macro network? So it's all those kind of models and test cases we want to work through over the course of the next few years as we bring this new O-RAN technology to the fore.
Tom Bennett there on the challenges faced by operators looking to deploy Openran. There are certainly still many questions to be answered. Now, opening up the RAN naturally leads to more vendor choice for operators, but this disaggregated ecosystem could also open up new security threats and challenges. I spoke to Ronan Spira and Tom Walker of Fortinet. First, let's hear what Tom has to say.
I think that the basis and the foundations for what Openran is trying to deliver and trying to bring, which is ultimately an open ecosystem and an ability to drive down the complexity and the cost sometimes associated with single vendor scenarios. It is a great foundational benefit. But the key aspect of having a multi-vendor environment is that you potentially have a number of different possible threat vectors and a number of additional types of risk and threat that you need to consider within that overall ecosystem. So being able to provide segmentation between different technology types and vendor types, being able to have granular visibility across how those different components are stitched together technically, but also how information is being shared and passed between those components. And importantly, as part of any exposure function, whether that's as part of the service that's being offered for Openran, or importantly, exposure capabilities to allow those vendor technologies to be updated as part of a software update cycle, needs to have granular control and importantly, visibility to ensure that there is clarity on what's being updated by who, when, and how. So really, Openran gives a lot of potential benefit to the operators and ultimately to consumers, but having a multi-vendor, multifaceted environment can bring with it some additional potential risk and threat.
We talk about Openran, but Openran is a part of a bigger picture or a bigger ecosystem, and that is the radio access network or the 5G new RAN. And this is something which has never been so important. I mean, there are many capabilities that only depend on the RAN itself and its capabilities, plus the fact that it's much more distributed, it's highly scalable, that a lot of it is going to terminate not just in the core, but at the at the edge compute side, the multi-access edge compute sides. All of that, and Openran is part of that evolution, or calls for by default, a very stringent and security build up for this environment from the outset.
Fortinet's Ronan Spira and Tom Walker there, outlining some of the main network security considerations associated with Open RAN architectures. Now, the dramatic growth of the Open RAN ecosystem also extends to component manufacturers, which are developing and supplying the enabling components that turn the theory of Open RAN into reality. One such company is Xilinx, and I asked EVP and General Manager Liam Madden how he sees the emerging market and specifically the role of RF system-on-chip technology.
The thing that's driving in radio is RF SoC. And that's, from my perspective, the way I look at it is it's like a single chip radio that's capable of providing 4x4 and 8x8 capability with a single device. And then by using multiple devices, you can expand into 32 TRX or indeed 64 TRX massive MIMO. RF SoC also has capabilities hardened for the DU, and that would include things like RSFEC, which is the capability to do very complicated encoding. We're currently shipping in mass volumes for RF SoC. And I also did want to mention our RF SoC DFE. This is a product we announced last November. Its capabilities are really enhanced by hardening in an ASIC-like way a lot of the DFE capability. And that allows us to compete head-to-head with ASICs in terms of power, cost, and performance.
So a lot of capabilities already developed, but what are the current requirements of vendor partners and customers around Openran products?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of announcements these days around commercial rollouts. And really, the technology that we provide covers the entire gamut of 5G, whether it be small cell, whether it be macro, whether it be massive MIMO, or indeed millimeter wave. We also have technology in the millimeter wave area as well. These days operators are looking for getting a lot of coverage, and that really requires the technology that's in massive MIMO. And as I said, RF SoC plays very strong there in the RF side of things. But we also have our new Versal technology, our 7 nanometer technology that supports advanced beamforming. In fact, our Versal product is currently being deployed in a tier 1 in North America right now. If we look at other geographies, we know that India has been delayed a little, but we do expect deployments to start in India next year once the auctions happen, which will probably happen early in 2022. When we look at what operators are looking for, they're looking for multi-carrier capability. In Europe particularly, they're looking for high output power, maybe greater than 300 watts. They're also looking for 300 to 400 megahertz of instantaneous bandwidth and greater than 200 megahertz of occupied bandwidth. So all in all, these are very stringent requirements, but we're very confident that our technology is capable of that.
And you can watch full-length versions of all these interviews. They're all available to view on demand. You'll find details on the Spotlight on 5G section of the TelecomTV website. Okay, it's time now for our roundtable discussion on 5G RAN. So let me introduce our panelists. José Antonio Aranda, Innovation and Product Strategy Director at Cellnex. Matt Conrod, Director of vRAN Business Development at Intel. Geetha Ram, Global Head of Telco Solution Incubations at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Arnaud Vamparys, Senior VP Radio Networks and 5G Champion at Orange. And Tom Walker, Manager, Consulting Systems Engineering, Telco and 5G at Fortinet. Hello everyone, good to see you all. Okay, let's get going with our first question for today. And that is, what are the key areas of technical innovation that operators need right now from their existing incumbent 5G radio access network technology suppliers? How can the capabilities of existing 5G RAN be advanced? Geetha, let's come to you first.
Well, thanks, Ray, and thanks for having me on this panel. So the way I look at it from an incumbent perspective, the net perspective, and the operators and what they're trying to do on the 5G innovation, technology innovation, the baseline, right, making sure that the baseline is set. And what I mean by baseline is if you look at the current incumbent monolithic solution, the appliance model, if you will, you look at two things that are very important, the performance and density, and then the power requirements. So those things, as you move to the virtual RAN world or the open RAN world, those things still need to be met. What you take as open platforms need to meet the requirements that are currently existing in the appliance world. The performance, the density, the power requirements have to be met. For me, that is what I call the baseline innovation and the technology innovation for the baseline. And everything else from there, any other kind of innovation comes at the top of that. So at a minimum, the operators are looking at that from a technological perspective, is that baseline of power, performance, density, and so on.
Okay, great. Thank you, Geetha. Matt, let's come to you next.
If you look at RAN today, it's very cyclical in its needs for compute. There are things called the busy hour. There are hot cells. And operators build out for a number of years in the future to minimize site visits. So there's a tremendous amount of inherent unuse of the resources for the network build out. And what Cloud RAN offers is the ability, with a flexible infrastructure to do more than one workload. It offers the ability to increase the resource utilization. At nighttime, why not do an AI workload? Or turn off resources if you don't need them. And in addition, with the flexible cloud-like infrastructure, you can move workloads from the edge to the core to get the best network performance for a given slice. I take the UPF, for instance. Moving that to the edge of the network will drive lower latency for a given use case. And I think the operators want more flexibility in infrastructure, better resource utilization, and ability to increase the rate of technology innovation in the market.
Thank you, Matt. So they want more, as ever, of course. Tom, let's come to you next.
So I think if I think about current demand and potential future new technologies associated with RAN, and actually I look at the sort of the meld between where RAN and transport meet. Certainly one of the areas that operators want to try and embrace to minimize and streamline the significant cost implications of 5G RAN build out is to utilize wherever possible more cost-effective transport mechanisms and connectivity mediums, whether that's general purpose internet, whether that's shared infrastructure with other operators, and importantly, the ability to embrace technologies like, for example, SD-WAN, and embedding SD-WAN as part of the radio network itself to effectively make potentially better or more optimized choices on where traffic can be sent, more intelligent choices on where traffic can be sent when it needs to connect to core resources or even further edge resources. So I think that's one distinct area of technology innovation that operators can take advantage of and potentially want to try and drive forwards, ultimately to increase the flexibility of how they deliver their RAN.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tom. And Arnaud, can we get the perspective from Orange?
Yes, as Orange, we're operating in 28 countries and we are number one in 4G quality in many of them. We want to keep this advantage in 5G. We have launched 5G in 6 countries in Europe and we have deployed 5G massive MIMO antennas on our existing 4G sites, enabling us to achieve to multiply by 3 or 4 the average speed. And of course, we are working a lot in the beamforming capability on these new antennas. And even we have a unique place where we can compare all our vendors' performance for that. And it's good because in the first benchmark we have, external benchmark, we are number one in 5G quality in countries like France or Spain. The second key technical area of innovation is energy consumption, as already mentioned. It's very important for us. We have in our Engage 2025 a strategic plan, an objective to divide by 10 the unitary energy consumption on our networks. And So we are pushing a lot. We have pushed a lot in the standard with the sleep mode we introduced as Orange Labs. And now we are implementing that on our footprint. Of course, on all these subjects, beamforming, energy consumption, and many others, we want to have a customer experience view, an end-to-end view. So we have a device and network perspective at the same time.
How much traction is there right now for virtual RAN or vRAN technology? And is this a suitable or natural stepping stone to Open RAN? One of the big questions out in the industry right now. José Antonio, let's come to you first.
Thank you very much for the question. I really think that there's a lot of traction currently on virtual RAN. We all see that currently the leaders of equipment vendors, Nokia, Ericsson, and Huawei, or even ZTE, are currently deploying different solutions. But we see more and more alternative vendors coming to the market. But the reality is that the traditional vendors haven't been successful to translate what is being this internal increase of traffic from the mobile operators into additional revenue. And therefore you see, and there are different big companies and consultancy firms setting up the expectations. And you see, for instance, Gartner, that they have their curve where at the peak you see vRAN as one of the most expected technology to evolve, as well as others like edge computing. But if you look at what will be the representation of vRAN in the market in the next 5 years, for example, you see that it will only represent between 15 to 20% of the radio access network in the market. But it's true that there is a little bit of evolution towards Open RAN, and vRAN is for sure the first step. We see that from CRAN, where you have the baseband in a central location, vRAN is the logical move, trying to virtualize the baseband, but having that in proprietary solutions and proprietary interfaces is letting other solutions like Open RAN to appear as an alternative, to use open interfaces, to use hardware and software decouple in a similar manner as we have seen in virtual RAN, that the radio functions and the baseband functions are split. Our expectations are that Open RAN will represent around 10% of the radio access equipment in the next 5 years. Although we see that there are customers like, for instance, Telefonica, that they have already mentioned that 50% of their investment in the next 5 years will come from investment in Open RAN. But we see that will be certain operators like Vodafone, like Orange, Deutsche Telekom, but not the majority of the mobile operators in the world.
Okay, thank you, José Antonio. Matt, let's come to you next.
Yeah, thank you, Ray. We're seeing quite a bit of traction for vRAN or Cloud RAN in the industry. Some very public announcements: Rakuten in Japan, Verizon in North America, both with Cloud RAN deployments, and some other ones just recently announced. Vodafone UK announced their intention for an Open RAN deployment. So tremendous amount of public announcements, and we're very encouraged about what's to come in the 2021 year. Intel sees Cloud RAN and Open RAN as the same, synonymous. They're both disaggregating the traditional RAN network. Different operators to have different technology introduction risks or appetite for risks, and one way to minimize risk in deploying new technology is to take it in smaller pieces. Start with Cloud RAN and then eventually deploy more of an open interface as well. But it's really up to the operator and their desire to introduce new technologies into their network.
Okay, thank you, Matt. And Arnaud, let's come to you next.
Yes, if you speak about vRAN versus Openran, in fact, it's the central pillar of Openran because you have three pillars inside. The first one is openness to foster vendor diversity, the cloudification itself, because we can run radio software on more generic hardware, like what you have started on the core network side. And the third pillar is on intelligence with the evolution from non-real-time SESON to a RIC-run intelligent controller. If you have launched this momentum 3 years ago with many other operators, especially inside O-RAN Alliance, it was to foster innovation, to achieve better performance, and to reduce cost either on the investment side or on our operational cost. And of course, we see vRAN technology and maturity right now for non-massive MIMO, and I'm sure on the massive MIMO side as well, in the next years, we will reach a maturity on this new technology.
Okay, so we'll move on now to our third question. And that is, will Open RAN-based radios ever reach technical parity with traditional radios? Do they need to be equally as good, or will the economics make up for some performance shortfalls? Arnaud, what's your view here?
Yes, Open RAN technologies are under maturation, and that's why in Europe recently, perhaps you have seen with other major operators, we published some common technical requirements for that to really focus on the right path. And if I go to technical parity, we still have some work to do on the frontal, on the open frontal for massive MIMO case, especially on uplink performance, and we are working hard on that. On the cloudification, it's the same. When we move from non-massive MIMO that we had on 4G to the 5G massive MIMO, we have a processing power that is multiplied by 70. So we imagine, and we have seen a recent announcement to have hardware acceleration technologies more suited to run software arriving, and I'm sure that from next year and the year after, we'll start to see some good solution in that field. Then on the third pillar on Open RAN, that is on the intelligent part, we already have automized quite a lot our radio optimization processes in the 28 countries where we operate. We have operating with the same tool more than 1 million cells with 7 million parameters change every month on our footprint. And of course, we need these new technologies of Open RAN because we have beamforming, we have slicing that are arriving on our networks, so the complexity will grow. And we need definitely these new technologies that was put under the RAN intelligent controller to achieve this further automation on our footprint. And our key objective is to stay and to keep this leadership quality position we had already on 4G.
Okay, great. Well, it is clear that there's a willingness to bring Open RAN technology into the market from a number of major operators. Okay, let's move on now. Do operators need to extend the reach of their 5G radio access networks inside buildings, or is 4G and Wi-Fi good enough? Jose Antonio, what do you think to this?
Yes, I really think that the answer is yes. The operators will need to extend the reach of 5G inside buildings. We, as Cellnex infrastructure provider, we have around 5,000 small cells and deployment outside buildings and indoor. And also we have around 1,500 Wi-Fi action points. And despite all of these infrastructure from the mobile operators on 4G and Wi-Fi, we see that there is enormous demand to have more and more access network capacity. We are part of a small cell forum, and their forecast for Europe is that in the next 10 years, we will need from 10,000 to 20,000 new small cells in Europe. And also, one important data, and now that we are talking about Openran, is that the expectations of all of these new small cells for the next 5 years, 80% of them will be Openran compliant. I would like to give you a couple of examples of why we think that 5G it is necessary. And basically, it is because the demand of our customers. You know that one of the business that we have is implementation of a distributed antenna system and a small cell deployment in those areas. And in those areas focus on underground stations or transport hubs in general, or stadiums or mall, hospitals, skyscrapers. And it is the venue owner who is asking to implement 5G in their venues. And let me give you an example. We recently installed small cells and a distributed antenna system in Manchester, in the Stadium of Manchester, in the Etihad Stadium. And we installed 4G. But rapidly, the venue owner asked us, and the mobile operators asked us to migrate to 5G because the customers are eager to use 5G in hotspots.
Okay, excellent. Really interesting example there. Thanks, Jose Antonio. Geetha, what is your view? Does 5G need to be extended inside buildings?
Yes, absolutely yes. And I totally agree with Jose's comments there. Absolutely, it has to be extended. And I look at it, why is that? There's two reasons for it. One of them is pretty obvious. I mean, that's the one that everybody veers towards, right? So there's a lot of data to be processed, a lot of connectivity contained in a small environment, whether it's the venues, the casinos, the retail, the manufacturing, I mean, you name it. You would require that type of processing, in a private 5G or a private environment. Okay, so that's the obvious need for it and the obvious answer. But the other is, recently there was a mobility report that suggested this, which I agree with, is 40% of the traffic, say peak traffic in urban areas for the processing in the public macro network comes from the private environments. So either you process that, either you manage that in the public networks, in the macro networks, or you extend the 5G into the private space. So I think it is more economical to extend it because you get the added benefits of, all of the processing of the applications in the private environment. That also helps in this case if you extend it to the private network. And the beauty of this from an operator standpoint is that the same hardware infrastructure, the same software optimized for the private network would be applicable in the private from the public. So for an instance, if you take the hardware infrastructure from an HPE standpoint, it is the same hardware that will play probably at a smaller scale, but it will play in the private space. Similarly, from a software standpoint, the Cloud RAN software, even the packet core, the optimized packet core versus the macro packet core, the same set of features, the same set of software base will also play in the private space. So it's just a natural extension from the public to the private with a large amount of uplift.
Okay, thank you, Geetha. And Arnaud, what's the orange view here? Is 5G going to be extended inside buildings?
The demand from our society today is really ambient connectivity. So, of course, the indoor coverage quality is key when we are adding 5G to our 4G existing site. Of course, we verify the outdoor coverage quality, but as well the indoor one. And for specific case, we already have inside our full portfolio of indoor solution, we already have added 5G, as mentioned, to DAS, to distributed small cells, to repeaters, depending on the site. and on the building type. So we need as well to have a low band spectrum with good indoor capabilities, and that's why we focus quite a lot on 700 megahertz right now in Europe and Africa and Middle East, where we operate. And last but not least, we are number one fiber operator in Europe with around 50 billion connectable houses. So we have as well, of course, we have voice over Wi-Fi. We have add Wi-Fi 6 to the Livebox, that is our device equipment at home, and to the Wi-Fi repeater. And soon we have a new 6 gigahertz frequency band as well there. And it's good boost for our fiber customers as well, because it will increase, multiply the throughput, a bit like when you go from 4G to 5G.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Arnaud. Now to another question about the diversification of the ecosystem. Does the industry need more competition in the 5G radio components market as well as the RAN infrastructure market? Geetha, can I come to you with this one first?
Sure. Thanks, Ray. So the short answer again is yes, we do need more vendors in the space. I'd reword the competition to innovation. We do need a lot more players for fostering the innovation part, whether it is the radio components, the RF, the radio hardware infrastructure, the software, all of it. The really good part about this whole thing, opening up the RAN space and so on, is you foster that innovation. One party doesn't have to be responsible for everything. You could have everybody from incumbents to startups that look at, what they could do best in class hardware and software. And then the operators get to choose the best-in-class hardware and software. I mean, we as HPE were best-in-class in hardware. By no means we don't want to be, in the software space, trying to provide RIC, et cetera, right? But we can build servers, in our sleep. So that's the kind of thing that innovation, or as you call it, competition, will foster, is more and more of those opportunities, more and more of those building blocks will be available, best in class will be available for the operators. So it's a win-win for everybody, and it's absolutely required.
Okay, thank you, Geetha. Arnaud, what's your view here? Do we need more competition and more innovation in the 5G radio components market?
If I look to on the operator side in Europe, we have quite a lot of competition with hundreds of operators on this market. So, but in the last decade, if I look to the number of network suppliers, we have a more and more limited number. And even more recently, with a 5G cybersecurity toolbox rules, we could even restrict even more the possibilities for us as operators. So it's true that in Openran today, on this 3 pillar, you have the openness, so it could really help with, for example, the open front tool to have more vendor diversity. With indoor, outdoor solution for rural coverage, for private networks. We have this cloudification, and here as well, you have quite a diversity from infrastructure perspective. And last but not least, with intelligence, with RAN intelligent controller, it is designed in a way that it could give access to different software companies with X apps, R apps, that we could put that. And of course, it could really favor innovation, software flexibility, and many software companies as well could find a place in our ecosystem. So at the end, of course, we are working very well with big RAN vendors, and we'll continue to do so. But at the same time, we need to have a quite vivid ecosystem, and especially in Europe. So that's why we published this MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, beginning 2021 with other operators like Vodafone, Telefonica, Deutsche Telekom, and now Telecom Italia is in as well.
Okay, thank you, Arnaud. Matt, let's come to you next.
Yeah, I agree with Geetha on the topic that competition in the component space will spur on additional innovation, and this industry needs not only innovation, but we have to increase the rate of innovation to market. So I think competition would be good for everyone in all parts of the world. If I look at the Openran ecosystem, what I believe is most needed right now to get radio innovation is to define interfaces that are sound, and then create environments for those interfaces to be tested. Creating an environment where Openran can be connected and tested, I believe will be one of the best investments to drive a more robust and speed innovation to market.
Okay, thank you. And Jose Antonio, let's come to you now.
Yes, thank you very much. I think that we need more competition in the 5G radio components, but it is true that we more and more find competition in different layers. And looking at what it has been mentioned about Openran, for instance, you see that because there are different layers and different layers are provided by different vendors, you see a lot of competition in not only the layers, but in all the value chain. And for instance, on Openran, you have competition in the chipset suppliers, and you have Intel, Qualcomm, Xilinx, and NVIDIA. But you also have competition on the operating system, on the platform supplier, the virtualization platform supplier, and you have a lot of companies competing in that field. But also, if you look at where you are going to host all the DU and CU, the hardware, there's still a lot of competition because you can reuse the hardware, the generic hardware from the traditional Lenovo's, Dell, HP, etc., etc. And also, you see more and more vendors selling their RU solutions, their RU hardware, but also the DU and CU software. And it is also very interesting that for all of these, we see an enormous growth of interest to not only have each of these components, but have a system integrator trying to put all these pieces together. And you see, it was mentioned Rakuten, but Tech Mahindra, IBM, Cisco, and many others are positioning themselves as system integrators. So we do see that there is more competition than 10 years ago, although always additional competition is welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jose Antonio. And it's clear that there are a lot more companies now active overall in the radio access network market than there were a year or two ago. That's for absolute sure. Well, thank you, everybody. We have to leave our discussion here, at least for now. Thank you for sharing your views and opinions and joining us on this panel today. Thank you very much. And that brings our strategy outlook on 5G RAN to an end. But my colleague Guy Daniels will be back tomorrow with an in-depth look at 5G Edge. A reminder that you can view an extensive series of programmes as part of our Spotlight on 5G Week, from interviews and roundtables to live Q&As and special features. We'll be showcasing new content throughout the day, Monday through to Thursday. And today you can watch 2 further episodes of our Top 10 Moments in Mobile, where we take a look back at our best video content from 20 years of covering 3GSM and MWC. And tune in at noon UK time for The Slice, our daily news and analysis programme. Then Guy and I will be back at 5 PM UK time for the live after show, along with plenty of guests and 1 or 2 surprises. We'll also be answering your questions live on air, so please send them in now. We'll also have a special ORAN Alliance industry briefing. For now though, thanks for watching and goodbye.